The air was thick with tension as the human soldiers and the alien forces clashed on the battlefield. Bright flashes of energy weapons lit up the night sky, illuminating the chaotic scene. The alien princess stood tall, her emerald skin glowing. As she directed her forces with precision, her deep purple hair flowed like a dark river as she moved, her gaze unwavering even in the heat of battle. The war had erupted unexpectedly, with both sides caught off guard by the sudden intensity of the conflict. What was meant to be a routine mission for the princess's people had turned into a brutal and unforgiving war. The human soldiers, highly trained but outnumbered, fought valiantly to protect their planet and its allies. Among them stood one man, Jonas, a soldier whose loyalty and courage had been proven time and time again. He had seen wars before, but nothing like this one. The aliens were formidable, with advanced weaponry and tactics that kept them on the defensive. Jonas's heart raced as he watched the princess battle alongside her troops, her command a beacon of strength in the face of overwhelming odds. Jonas had always believed that humans were the underdogs in any fight, but this time, he wasn't so sure. The alien forces were relentless, and their resolve to conquer was as strong as any he had ever seen. But there was something different about this war, something that made Jonas question everything he had believed about the alien race. The princess, despite her fierce nature, seemed to care for her people deeply, and he noticed that her eyes occasionally flicked toward him with a look of recognition, as though she sensed something more than just a soldier on the battlefield. As the battle raged on, the unexpected happened. A sniper's bullet tore through the air, aimed directly at the princess. The human soldiers had trained to protect their own, but none had expected to be faced with such a brutal turn of events. Jonas's instincts kicked in before he even had time to think. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the line of fire, taking the full force of the bullet meant for her. Pain coursed through his body as he crumpled to the ground, but his vision was focused only on the princess's stunned expression as she rushed toward him. The battle around them seemed to freeze for a moment, the sounds of conflict muffled by the pain and the urgency of the moment. Her delicate hands gripped his blood-soaked uniform, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. "Why would you protect me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and gratitude. Jonas, struggling to keep his eyes open, could barely speak, but he managed a weak smile. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said, his voice barely a whisper. As the princess looked down at the soldier who had risked his life for her, she realized there was more to him than just a soldier. She had witnessed his bravery on the battlefield, but this sacrifice, this act of selflessness, was something entirely different. In that moment, she felt a shift within her, an understanding that would alter the course of both their lives forever. She had always believed that the power of her people was unmatched, but now, standing over this human, she realized that there was something stronger than the power of any army, the strength of one individual's heart. As Jonas began to lose consciousness, the princess's determination hardened. She couldn't let him die. Not after everything he had done for her. She would heal him, no matter the cost. The forbidden technique that had been passed down through the generations of her people was something only a few knew, a dangerous and ancient method of healing that had been lost to most of the galaxy. But there was no other option left. She had to save him, no matter what it took. The princess bent over Jonas, her hands glowing with a soft green light as she began the ritual. The warmth of her touch seemed to seep into his skin, and the pain in his body began to fade. The energy in the air was thick, like an electrical storm, as the forbidden technique took hold. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the world around them, the war, the chaos, all fell away as the healing process began to take root. And in that moment, the princess realized that there was something deeply human about Jonas, something that set him apart from every other being she had ever encountered. It was his unshakable resolve to protect those he cared about, even at the cost of his own life. as the healing light spread through his body. The princess knew this moment would change everything for them both. Asterisk. The air around the princess crackled with energy as her hands hovered over Jonas's battered body. She focused all her energy on the Forbidden's healing technique, the one her people had long since abandoned. It was a dangerous art, one that came with risks, but there was no other choice. The human had sacrificed everything for her, and now it was her turn to save him. The battlefield had become a distant memory, replaced by the intense focus of the princess's mind as she worked. Her green skin shimmered under the weight of the energy that flowed through her, her thoughts only on Jonas's life. The room around them began to hum, the power from the technique swirling through the air, filling the space with an unearthly glow. Jonas could feel the heat of her touch, a burning sensation that seeped into his very soul. The pain in his body faded, but it was replaced with a strange warmth, one that felt like both fire and ice. He had never known anything like it, and his mind struggled to hold on to consciousness as the energy surged through him. Through blurry eyes, he saw the princess's face, a mixture of determination and worry, bent over him, her focus unwavering. "What is happening?" he whispered, his voice weak but full of curiosity. He had no idea what kind of power the princess wielded, but he trusted her implicitly. The pain had faded, but the sensation of the energy pulsing through his body felt foreign, almost otherworldly. "You're healing," she answered, her voice calm but strained. "This is the Forbidden's technique, one that has been lost to most of my people. It is a dangerous power, but it is the only way I can save you." Jonas's thoughts swirled as he tried to process what she was saying. He had no idea what kind of technique she was using, but he knew this wasn't something he had ever experienced before. The power she wielded seemed ancient, far beyond anything his world could comprehend. His eyes flickered between the princess and the strange light filling the room, and for the first time, he wondered what kind of world she came from. The princess's hands glowed brighter, and the healing energy intensified. Jonas could feel his wounds mending, the bullet that had torn through him slowly being pushed out of his body. It was painful, but it was a pain he welcomed, for it meant he was surviving. With each passing second, his strength was returning, but so was his confusion. Why had she done this? Why had she saved him? "You shouldn't have done this," Jonas muttered, though his voice was weak. "I'm just a soldier. You didn't have to risk everything for me." The princess didn't answer immediately, her focus too intense to break. Her mind raced with thoughts of what this healing meant. She had never used this technique on anyone before, and the consequences of doing so were unknown. The power she was tapping into could have dangerous effects, but she couldn't let Jonas die. She couldn't let him suffer for something she had never expected. She had seen what he had done for her, and now it was her turn to return the favor. The technique continued to glow brightly, surrounding them both in an ethereal light. The princess was pushing her own limits, bending her body's natural energy to heal Jonas in a way that few would dare. It was a risk she had to take, not just for him, but for the future. The bonds between their species could not be severed by war alone. She had seen something in him that no one else had. In his eyes, she saw loyalty and strength, qualities that had been lost in her own people long ago. As the healing process began to stabilize, Jonas's breathing became more steady. His wounds were closing, his body repairing itself at an impossible rate. He could feel the energy ebbing from him, the power of the princess's touch slowly retreating, and with it, the painful sensations that had plagued him. He opened his eyes, finding the princess's gaze still fixed on him, her face filled with determination and something else. "You're safe now," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "The bullet is gone, and you will heal fully. You will live." Jonas didn't know what to say. He had expected to die on that battlefield, to be nothing more than a casualty of a war that didn't belong to him. But instead, here he was alive, saved by an alien princess with power far beyond anything he had ever imagined. He felt his strength returning, but there was something else inside him, a sense of awe at what the princess had done for him. "I don't know how to repay you," Jonas murmured, his voice still weak, "but I promise you, I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. I owe you my life." The princess finally allowed herself a small smile, though her expression remained serious. "You don't need to repay me," she said, her voice softer than before, "but you will owe me something far greater than your life. You owe me your trust and your loyalty." Jonas nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had already given her both. He would stand by her side. No matter what came next, the bond between them had formed in the most unexpected of ways, but it was one that would change everything for both their people. The healing had been complete, but the real battle was just beginning. The battlefield had faded into the background, replaced by the quiet, heavy silence between Jonas and the princess. As the healing energy finally dissipated, leaving only the soft hum of the air around them, Jonas felt his body returning to its full strength. The pain was gone, the wounds closed, but there was an undeniable change inside him. A connection had formed, stronger than any bond he had ever known, and it was between him and the alien princess who had saved his life. He sat up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. The princess had done more than heal him. She had shown him something he had never expected: compassion. In a world where war and violence seemed to be the only constants, it was rare to find someone who acted out of something other than strategy or survival. Jonas glanced at her, the same princess he had seen fighting with such intensity only hours before, and he saw something different now. Beneath the fierce exterior, there was a vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. The princess, noticing his gaze, gave a small nod, as if acknowledging the silent understanding that had passed between them. "You're stronger than I thought," she said, her voice still calm, but there was a hint of respect in her tone. "Most would not survive such a wound, let alone make it through the healing process. You are different, Jonas." Jonas felt a rush of gratitude mixed with uncertainty. The princess had used the Forbidden's technique on him, something that could have endangered both their lives. He understood that, but the bond between them was undeniable. He had been willing to sacrifice himself for her without a second thought. And in return, she had done the impossible to save him. "Maybe we're both different," Jonas replied quietly, trying to find the right words. He had never expected to be in this position, standing here with the alien princess who had just saved his life. The whole situation was a blur, but there was one thing he knew for sure. He would do anything to repay her, to protect her as she had protected him. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination and something else, something Jonas couldn't quite place. "I know you've already sacrificed for me," the princess said, her voice steady, "but now I ask you for something else. I need your help. This war is far from over, and we cannot fight it alone." Jonas nodded, his heart pounding with the weight of her words. He had already made up his mind. He would stand by her, no matter the cost. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the emotions stirring inside him. The princess hesitated for a moment, as though weighing her words carefully. "I need you to fight with us, to join our cause fully. The fate of both our worlds is at stake, and together we might have a chance to end this conflict. But it won't be easy. It will require trust between us, and between your people and mine." Jonas felt a surge of determination rising inside him. He had already been through the worst of it, and he knew that he couldn't turn his back on her now. The princess had saved his life, and now it was his turn to protect her. He looked at her with unwavering resolve. "I'm with you," he said simply, his voice clear and strong. "I'll fight for you, for your people, and for this chance to end the war. You have my trust." The princess nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you," she said, the words carrying more weight than any simple gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means. I've fought for my people for so long, but I've never had someone fight for me like this before. It gives me hope, Jonas." They stood there for a moment, the gravity of their decision settling over them both. This wasn't just about survival. This was about building a future where their worlds might finally find peace. But peace would not come easily. They both knew that the road ahead would be filled with danger, uncertainty, and sacrifice. Jonas could feel the weight of that future pressing down on him. But for the first time since the war had begun, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something greater. The princess's resolve had ignited something inside him, something that made him want to fight harder than ever before. "You've made a powerful decision," the princess said, breaking the silence. "But be prepared. The path ahead will not be kind. Many will question your loyalty, your allegiance. Your people will not understand why you stand with me, but you must stand firm." Jonas didn't flinch. "I understand," he said. "I've been through battles before, but this is something different. It's worth fighting for." The princess regarded him for a moment, as though searching for any trace of doubt. But she found none. She had seen countless soldiers fight for her people, but none had ever been willing to sacrifice everything, like Jonas. "Then we have a pact," she said, her voice full of conviction, "a pact of trust and loyalty. And together, we will win this war." Jonas nodded once more, his heart steady. Whatever came next, he was ready. The battle for peace was just beginning. But for the first time, he felt certain that they were not alone. Together, they could face whatever came their way. Asterisk. The war had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. The princess and Jonas stood side by side, overlooking the tactical map spread out before them. The situation was grim. Their forces were outnumbered and under-equipped, but they had something. Their enemies didn't unity. They had formed a bond that no amount of firepower could break. The princess's alien army had always been strong, but now with Jonas's help, they were beginning to strategize in new ways. "We can't afford to waste any more time," the princess said, her voice firm. "The enemy is moving faster than anticipated. We need to strike now, before they can reinforce their positions. We'll use everything we have left to push them back." Jonas looked at her, his brow furrowed in thought. He had seen the enemy's forces firsthand, and he knew the risks of such an offensive. "Are you sure this is the right move?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. "If we attack now, we might not have enough to hold them off after. We're already stretched thin." The princess didn't flinch. "We cannot sit idly by and wait for the enemy to come to us. We must take the fight to them, even if it means sacrificing our own strength. If we can weaken them now, it will give us the advantage we need to turn the tide of the war." Jonas nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. The choice was clear. They had to act fast, or they risked losing everything. He looked down at the map again, his mind racing with potential strategies. "We'll need to hit their supply lines first. Without their reinforcements, they'll be vulnerable. If we can disrupt their communications, we'll cut them off from any hope of coordination." The princess's eyes gleamed with approval. "Exactly, we'll strike their supply depots and communication hubs. That will give us the window we need to hit them where it hurts. We can't afford to be too cautious. We need to act with speed and precision." The tension in the room was palpable, but Jonas could feel the fire of determination burning within him. This was their best chance to make a real difference, to push the enemy back and show them that they weren't helpless. "Let's do it," he said, his voice calm and resolute. The princess gave a sharp nod, signaling to her commanders to prepare the forces for the mission. Within minutes, the room was filled with the hum of activity as soldiers prepared for battle. The plan was set, and there was no turning back. Jonas found himself side by side with the princess once more as they moved toward the front lines. Her eyes, once filled with doubt and fear, now burned with unwavering resolve. There was no room for hesitation. The war had to end, and it had to end now. As they advanced, Jonas noticed how the princess's presence seemed to inspire those around her. Her people were following her, trusting her to lead them to victory. They moved quickly through the jungle terrain, their footsteps silent but deliberate. The enemy was close, but the element of surprise was on their side. They reached the enemy's forward base without being detected, and Jonas could feel the tension rise in the air. The plan was simple, but the stakes were high. One mistake could cost them everything. The first explosion shook the ground, signaling the beginning of the assault. The soldiers surged forward, their weapons blazing as they attacked the enemy's supply lines with ruthless efficiency. Jonas fought alongside the princess, his heart pounding with adrenaline. Every step was a calculated risk, but it was a risk they had to take. In the chaos of battle, Jonas found himself face to face with an enemy commander. The man was larger than most, his armor gleaming under the smoke-filled sky. "You are brave to fight for her," the enemy commander sneered, his voice full of disdain. "But it won't matter. She's nothing but a puppet, and you're just a tool in her game." Jonas's eyes narrowed, and with a swift movement, he drew his blade. "If you think I'm just a tool, then you clearly don't understand what we're fighting for," he said, his voice cold. "This war is not about her power. It's about our survival." With a grunt, the enemy commander lunged, and the battle began in earnest. Jonas fought with everything he had, his body moving instinctively, fueled by the raw energy of the fight. His focus was razor-sharp, but his mind never strayed far from the princess. She was somewhere on the battlefield, leading their forces with unmatched skill, and every time Jonas's eyes found her, he knew their bond was growing stronger. The battle raged on, but with each passing moment, the enemy's forces began to falter. Their supply lines were disrupted, their communications scrambled, and their soldiers began to lose hope. Jonas and the princess had done what they set out to do. They had given their people a fighting chance, and now the enemy was on the back foot. As the last of the enemy's forces retreated, Jonas stood in the midst of the battlefield, panting and bloodied but alive. The princess stood beside him, her eyes scanning the wreckage of the battle, but her expression was one of quiet satisfaction. "We did it," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "This is just the beginning, but it's a victory we'll never forget." Jonas smiled, his body still thrumming with the intensity of the fight. "We've only just begun," he agreed, his voice strong. "There's more to come, but we've got this. Together we'll win this war." The battle had been a decisive victory, but it came at a great cost. The enemy had retreated, but the scars of the war were evident all around them. The battlefield was littered with the fallen, both human and alien. Jonas stood among them, his heart heavy with the weight of their sacrifices. He had fought alongside the princess, and though their forces had won, it was clear that the war was far from over. The real fight was just beginning, and the price of victory would continue to rise. As they made their way back to their temporary base, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gripped him. The victory was bittersweet. They had achieved their objective, but there was still so much more to do. The enemy was not easily defeated, and the war would continue until one side emerged victorious. The princess walked beside him, her expression unreadable. She was a commander, a leader, and a warrior, but there was something different about her now. The weight of the war had settled on her shoulders, and the burden of leadership had begun to show. Jonas could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but she never faltered. She led with quiet strength, and despite the toll the war had taken on her, she never once allowed her resolve to waver. "You did well," Jonas said, his voice sincere. "We all did, but we still have a long way to go." The princess nodded, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the horizon. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady, "but this is a turning point. We've shown them that we are not to be underestimated. We have the strength to fight back, and now we must press that advantage. The enemy will regroup, but so will we. We will strike again, harder and faster." Jonas watched as she spoke, his admiration for her growing by the minute. She had a vision, a strategy that was beginning to take shape. She was no longer just a princess leading an army. She was a commander, a leader who had earned his respect. He had seen many commanders in his time, but none with the sheer willpower and strength that the princess possessed. Their forces were scattered, but the princess had a plan. It was time to regroup, to reorganize, and to plan the next phase of the war. "We'll need to move fast," she said, turning to face her commanders. "The enemy will try to reinforce, and they won't stop until they crush us. But we won't give them that chance. We will strike first." Jonas was impressed by her calm decisiveness. She didn't hesitate, didn't doubt. She knew what had to be done, and she expected nothing less than total commitment from those around her. As they prepared for the next phase of the battle, Jonas couldn't help but think back to the moment when he had taken the bullet for her. It felt like a lifetime ago. The pain, the struggle, the uncertainty, all of it seemed so distant now. He had fought and bled for her, and now he would fight alongside her again. This war was no longer just about survival. It was about something more. It was about protecting the future of both their worlds. The princess looked over at him, her gaze steady and resolute. "Are you ready for what comes next?" she asked. Jonas didn't hesitate. "I'm with you," he said, his voice unwavering. "I'll follow you to the end, no matter what happens." The princess's expression softened for a brief moment, but only for a moment. She had always been focused on the mission, on the war, but Jonas could sense that something had shifted between them. There was a mutual understanding now, a respect that had been forged in the heat of battle. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I couldn't do this without you." Jonas nodded, but his thoughts were already turning to the next battle. They had won a small victory, but the enemy would be back, stronger than ever. There was no time to rest, no time to celebrate. They had to keep moving, keep pushing forward. As they gathered their forces and made their final preparations, Jonas couldn't help but feel the weight of the coming storm. The enemy would regroup, but so would they. The tide of the war had turned, but the real challenge lay ahead. Jonas knew that the princess was right. This was just the beginning. The real fight would come when they least expected it. But they were ready. The road ahead was uncertain, and the battles to come would be harder than any they had faced. But Jonas was no longer afraid. The princess had shown him what it meant to fight for something greater than oneself. Now, he was ready to stand by her side, no matter what challenges they faced. They were in this together, and together, they would face whatever came next. "We'll win this," Jonas said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We've already come this far. We won't stop until it's over." The princess looked at him, her eyes filled with a fire that matched his own. "Together," she said, her voice steady, "we'll win." The war had reached its tipping point. The enemy's forces had regrouped, but so had they. Jonas and the princess stood side by side once more, preparing for the final push. They had fought through countless battles, each one more brutal than the last, but this time, it was different. This time, they were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their worlds. Jonas could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The battle ahead would be their greatest challenge. Yet, the enemy's forces had grown stronger, but their resolve had only deepened. He knew that this would be the moment that determined everything. If they failed now, all the sacrifices, all the lives lost would be in vain. But if they succeeded, it would mark the beginning of a new era. The princess stood with her commanders, her eyes sharp and focused. She had led them through the worst of it, and now she was prepared to lead them to victory. She had already proven her strength, her courage, and her unwavering resolve. but Jonas could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The weight of leadership had taken its toll on her, but she would never show weakness in front of her people. She couldn't afford to. "This is it," the princess said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "This is our chance to end the war once and for all. We will strike at their heart, their command center. If we can destroy their leadership, the rest of their forces will crumble. We can finally bring peace to our worlds." Jonas nodded, feeling the fire of determination stir within him. He had made his choice, and he would follow her to the very end. They had become more than allies in this war. They had become partners, bound by a shared goal and an unbreakable trust. No matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. As the forces gathered, ready for the final assault, Jonas stood beside the princess, his mind focused on the mission ahead. He knew that the battle would be fierce, but they had something their enemies didn't. They had the element of surprise and the determination to see it through. The princess's forces were well trained, and Jonas had learned to trust them as much as he trusted himself. Together, they would bring this war to an end. The first wave of the assault was swift and brutal. The enemy's defenses were strong, but they were not prepared for the coordinated strike that Jonas and the princess had planned. As they moved through the enemy's lines, Jonas could feel the adrenaline surging through him. The sounds of battle were deafening. But all he could focus on was the task at hand. They had to reach the command center before the enemy could regroup. The princess fought beside him, her eyes locked on their objective. She was a force to be reckoned with, her skills on the battlefield unmatched by anyone Jonas had ever seen. As they advanced, the enemy forces began to falter. Their once unshakable resolve was beginning to crack. The princess's leadership had given them a fighting chance, and now they were going to take it. They reached the heart of the enemy stronghold. The command center loomed ahead, heavily fortified and guarded by the best of the enemy's troops. But Jonas and the princess didn't hesitate. They pushed forward, cutting through the enemy's defenses with precision and efficiency. Every step was a calculated risk, but they couldn't afford to waste time. As they breached the command center, Jonas could feel the weight of history on his shoulders. This was the moment that would change everything. The princess had fought for this moment for so long, and now it was within their grasp. They had the power to end the war, to bring peace to their worlds. But they had to take it. The enemy's commander was waiting for them inside. He stood at the center of the room, surrounded by his most loyal soldiers. "You think you've won?" he sneered, his voice filled with disdain. "But you're wrong. This war is far from over. You may have defeated my forces, but you will never defeat me." The princess stepped forward, her expression calm but full of resolve. "We're not here to defeat you," she said, her voice cold. "We're here to end this war. We're here to bring peace to our worlds, and you're standing in the way." The battle inside the command center was fierce. The enemy commander fought with every ounce of strength he had, but Jonas and the princess were relentless. They moved with precision, each strike a calculated step toward their ultimate goal. The enemy commander's resistance was futile, and within moments, he fell. The room fell silent as the last of the enemy's forces surrendered. The war was over. The princess looked at Jonas, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. They had done it. "It's over," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've won." Jonas looked at her, his heart filled with pride. "We've done it," he agreed. "Together." As the sun began to rise over the battlefield, Jonas and the princess stood side by side, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter. They had fought for peace, and now it was theirs. They had won the war, but the real victory was the bond they had formed. It was a bond that would last long after the war had ended. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Jonas felt hope. The princess had shown him that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward, and together they would face whatever came next. The war was over, but the journey was far from finished. The dust had barely settled, and already, the consequences of their victory were beginning to show. Jonas and the princess stood at the center of the newly liberated city, their eyes scanning the horizon. The battlefield had been won, but the real work was just beginning. There were countless lives to rebuild, and the scars of war would take time to heal. As the two of them walked through the city, Jonas could see the looks of gratitude and relief on the faces of the people. They had fought for this moment, for the chance to live in peace, and now it was becoming a reality. The princess had led them to victory, but it was the people's resilience and determination that had brought them through. They were stronger now, not just because they had won the war, but because they had learned what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. The princess turned to Jonas, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "The victory in battle is only one part of the war. Now we must rebuild, and we must unite our people. This is the true challenge. Peace will not come easily, but we have the strength to make it last." Jonas nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The victory had been hard-earned, and now the real challenge was to ensure it wasn't lost. He had seen firsthand the devastation war could cause, and he knew that the path to peace would require just as much strength and sacrifice as the battle itself. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steady. "We've won the war, and now we'll fight for the future. Together." The princess smiled, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. She had always been a warrior, but in that moment, Jonas saw something more. He saw a leader who cared deeply for her people, someone who would stop at nothing to ensure their future. "I couldn't do this without you," she said quietly. "You've been with me every step of the way. I won't forget it." They walked on, the sounds of the city rising around them. The people were beginning to rebuild, and though the road ahead would be long, there was a sense of hope in the air. For the first time in years, the people of both their worlds had a reason to believe in something better. The battle had been brutal, but now they had the chance to build something stronger from the ashes. Jonas felt the weight of the princess's words, and with every step they took, he felt a sense of peace begin to settle over him. He had been a soldier, fighting for survival, but now he was something more. He was part of something bigger, something that could change the course of history. As they approached the heart of the city, the princess paused, looking out over the crowd. The people were cheering, celebrating their hard-earned freedom, and for a moment, it seemed like the weight of everything they had been through was finally lifting. The princess turned to Jonas, her expression thoughtful. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," she said, her voice soft but filled with purpose. "But we've already proven what we can do when we stand together. This is just the beginning. We'll rebuild, we'll unite, and we'll create a future worthy of the sacrifices we've made." Jonas looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. He had seen what she was capable of, and now he believed in her more than ever. Together, they had achieved the impossible, and now they would build a future together. The journey had been long, and there would be challenges ahead, but they would face them side by side. "Whatever comes next," Jonas said, his voice steady, "I'll be right here. We'll face it together." The princess smiled, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. You've become more than a soldier to me. You've become my partner in this, and together, we will make this world a better place." As the sun set over the city, the promise of a new day hung in the air. The war was over, but their work was just beginning. They would rebuild, they would grow stronger, and they would ensure that peace lasted for generations to come. Together, they had fought for a future, and now, that future was theirs to shape. Jonas and the princess stood side by side, watching the city come to life with the energy of a people who had fought for their freedom. They had won the war, but the true victory would come in the years to follow. They had overcome the darkness, and now they had the chance to build something brighter. They had the chance to build a future together. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Jonas knew that they had only just begun. The battle for peace was long and difficult, but with the princess by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would face the future, no matter what challenges awaited them. The days that followed the war's end were filled with both hope and uncertainty. The city, once ravaged by conflict, was beginning to heal. The people moved about with a renewed sense of purpose, eager to rebuild what had been lost. The princess and Jonas stood together, watching as the foundations of a new world were laid brick by brick. The fight was over, but the real work had just begun. The princess had kept her promise. She was leading her people, working tirelessly to bring about the peace they had all fought so hard to achieve. She had set up councils, bringing together the leaders of different factions, all working toward a common goal: unity. It was the foundation of their future, and the princess was determined to make sure that the war would never happen again. Jonas had stood by her through it all. He had been her strength, her shield in battle, but now he was her partner in rebuilding. He had come to realize that the war had changed him in ways he never expected. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger than himself. He was fighting for the future. Together, the princess and Jonas led the charge to rebuild the city. Every day, new buildings went up, and people returned to work. They celebrated their victories, but they also remembered their losses. The fallen were honored, and their sacrifices were etched into the history of their people. It was a future they had earned, and it was a future they would protect at all costs. But there were still challenges ahead. The princess knew that true peace would take time. There were still lingering tensions between certain factions, and the scars of the war were not easily erased, but she refused to let fear or doubt rule her. She had led her people through the fire, and now she would lead them to a future of prosperity and unity. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Jonas found himself walking alongside the princess once again. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air was cool. With the promise of a new day, the streets were quieter now, the bustle of rebuilding replaced by a sense of calm. People were settling in, finding their place in the new world they were creating together. "I never imagined this would be our future," Jonas said, his voice thoughtful. "I thought we were just fighting to survive. But now, I see we're fighting for something far greater, a legacy." The princess looked at him, her gaze steady and full of understanding. "This is a legacy we've built together," she replied softly. "It's not just about rebuilding what was destroyed. It's about creating something new, a world where peace is the foundation, not the exception." Jonas nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had never expected to find himself here, standing beside the princess, leading a new era. But the war had forged a bond between them, a bond that was stronger than any battle they had fought for their people. And now, they were building a future together. The princess turned her gaze to the horizon, where the first stars of the evening were beginning to shine. "We will protect this world," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We will ensure that this peace lasts, no matter the cost. The future belongs to those who are willing to fight for it, and we will fight." Jonas stood by her side, feeling the weight of her words. They had already faced impossible odds and come out victorious. They had faced darkness together, and now they would face the light. Whatever came next, he knew they would face it together. The city below them was alive with the sounds of construction, of hope. It was a city that had risen from the ashes, and it would continue to grow. The people who had once fought against each other were now working together, united by the promise of a better tomorrow. They had seen the cost of war, and they would never forget it. But they had also seen the power of unity, of standing together for a common cause. And as the princess and Jonas looked out over the city, they knew that the future was theirs to shape. It would not be easy, but they were ready. They had built a foundation of peace, and now they would ensure that it would last for generations. Together, Jonas said, his voice filled with certainty, "We'll build a future that's worth fighting for." The princess smiled, a rare moment of softness in her usually composed expression. "Together," she agreed, her voice resolute, "we will leave a legacy of peace." As the stars filled the sky above them, Jonas and the princess stood side by side, ready for whatever the future held. They had fought for this moment, and now they would live for it. They had won the war, and in doing so, they had forged a bond that would last a lifetime, a bond that would shape the future of their worlds. Together, they had not only secured peace, they had built a legacy that would echo through the ages.